Hey, it's Jim Welninski from the PhotoTribe. I was talking to my friend Blake Rudis the other day, and we've been talking about doing some location workshops together. And so we were looking at some of the photographs that he shot on his recent trip to Olympic State Park. And he sent this one over and said, I want to see what you can do with this. So to me, that's a challenge. And when you throw the gauntlet down like that, I'm going to grab it. So I like this photograph. I think this is a great composition, and I can't wait to get to Olympic State Park myself. I've never been there. So not having ever been there, I have to really reach into my imagination and try to feel my way through this photo. And I think I want to go kind of the other way than I would normally go. I'm going to go right to black and white, and I'm going to put a gradient map adjustment layer on here and change my gradient to black-white. And I'm going to click on this color stop and drag my midpoint over. And we're going to do kind of a high key thing here, I think. So I'm going to put another color stop right about here and just govern my blacks a little bit. I don't want... There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So that looks pretty good. Give my blacks a little more room. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm looking pretty solid all the way out here, but I want to do something with my sky. I don't want this white sky. I want my light tones down in here. So I'm going to make a copy of my background layer and drag it to the top. And on top of there, I'm going to put a black and white adjustment layer. And why the black and white adjustment layer? Because I've got all these blues in my image. And I think I can make something really cool out of my sky here. And then just blend these two things together. So I moved the mask from my black and white layer down to the pixel layer. And you'll see why in just a minute. So let's drag these blues down. I'm just looking at my sky now. And you can see that there's stars up in the sky. So this was taken early in the morning, I think. Or maybe late at night. I don't know. Anyway, in any case, there's stars in the sky. And so I like this. I like this, this gradient that happens in the sky, and I can see these stars. And I know there's some yellows in these rocks here, so I want to bring those out. So we're going to do it like that. And I'm going to get on this mask now. And what I want to do is blend these two layers with a gradient. So I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and I want to foreground to transparent gradient. I want a linear gradient, and I'm painting at 100%. In this case, I want to paint with black, so I'm going to switch that. And I'm going to start right about here and just go up to the horizon line like that. And that's really what I'm looking for. So that looks pretty great. Now I can go back and tweak this gradient and just adjust it to get what I want. And that looks pretty good. That's pretty darn solid. Let's bring a little more black in there. And that's good. And I just got to watch this middle section here that I'm not blowing out. And that I'm not, whoops. You could see that I made a mistake. I didn't wait for the arrow before I tried to grab that triangle. So let's just delete that. And Photoshop threw down another color stop. I just don't want to be blowing out here or get tone compression in this middle section. All right, that looks pretty great. So I think the first thing that I'm going to want to do is just start to work up in this area here and, you know, just darken some of these tones selectively. So let's just throw a curve on here and pull it down like that. And now I'm going to invert this mask, and I'm going to grab my brush tool. So hit B for the brush, and then what we want to do is paint with, you know, about 20% opacity maybe. And I want to paint with white because I want to reveal that darkening adjustment. And I'm going to start out with kind of a big brush here and just start to darken some of this stuff in here a little bit at a time. And I'm using an opacity only brush. So That just gives me pressure sensitive control over my brush. And I think I'm going to change my opacity to 15 and paint even lighter. And I'm just being kind of, there we go. We just want to add some texture to this ice, right? Because it has texture in it, and let's see it come out. So I'm going to zoom in now. And now I'm going to paint with a smaller brush. And I'm going to start working some of these smaller areas here and just darken those up. Let's make our brush even smaller and just paint like this, and a little bigger. There we go. We just want to bring out this texture. So I don't think it was winter when he shot this, but it was obviously cold out on the lake because, you know, we've got this really cool ice that's starting to form here. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and just play up the ridges of this ice here that was obviously formed when the wind was blowing over the lake. All right, that looks good. Lots of texture in that ice too. So a little bit over here now, and we're going to make the brush even smaller and just hit some of these areas. My brush is too big. There we go. So when you're doing brushing techniques like this, you're always better off trying to do this stuff a little bit at a time rather than try to do it all at once, because if you try to do it all at once, it's going to look contrived, and then it, you know, that's exactly what we don't want, because once again, the mark of a good editor is that no one ever knows you were there. So we're just working this a little time. So I'm going to work in here just a little bit now. And that looks great. Just up in this rock. And I'm not sure how I would have fared on this morning. I'm really not one for being out on the ice in the winter, but needless to say, anything to get a great photograph, I absolutely would have done it. So we're just working some of these other areas here. I'm going to make this brush a little bigger. Just kind of. So, you know, when you're doing this, you're thinking like a painter, right? So now I need to decide if apparently my video driver wants to update. Do I want to darken this area? And I think I do want to darken some of it, but not all of it. So I'm just going to kind of do little squiggles in here. Like that. And I think we're in pretty good shape here. So let's zoom out. All right, I like that. So I think the next thing that I really want to do is I'm kind of not happy with the way this horizon looks. So I'm going to go back to my mask on my black and white layer, which if you remember is what gave us this sky and the horizon. And let's just zoom in here a little bit. And I'm going to make my brush kind of big here and, you know, pretty soft. And I'm going to paint it at 100%. I'm going to use my mouse for this. And what I want to do is just kind of erase some of the mask here and see if we can't blend this in a little better. So I'm going to need to paint with white. And whoops, it usually helps if you're on the mask, Jim. Guess I need to paint with black and not white. I should know that. So, you know, All right, so now let's decide if we like that. And yeah, you know, I like that a lot better. That looks much nicer than what we had. Okay, so let's go in on these rocks now. And they're in the distance, so I don't have to be really exact and really get in there and carve out this rock by dodging and burning it. But I do want to splash some light on this, so I'm going to grab a curve and just pull that up like this. And we're going to maintain some of that contrast in there, just like that. And then let's invert this mask. And I'm going back to my brush tool here. Let's make this a little smaller, nice and soft. And I'm going to paint with about 20% opacity. And I think I might just paint with white and splash just a little bit of light in here. And it doesn't really look like much is going on there. There we go. A little too much on the contrast there. There we go. Okay, there we go. That's better. So a little splash here, a splash there, like that. That looks good. And I think what I might want to do is just grab another curve here really quick. And I'm going to pull this down a touch and then invert this mask. And I'm going to grab a smaller brush and just burn in some of this area up here to kind of emphasize the different layers of things that are going on here. Because three-dimensionality in your photographs is a really important thing. And if you can maintain that, then again, that makes the edit look better because it doesn't look like you did anything to it. That looks good. Okay, I'm happy with that. So let's stop right here. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that I think I want a little contrast in some of this ice. So we can actually paint with contrast if we use a levels adjustment to do it. I'm going to just open that up a little bit. Open the whites up a little bit. Shut those blacks down just a touch. And now I want to compare and see how I've got more contrast. And I'm specifically looking in, you know, these areas over here. All right, let's close that down and invert this mask. And I'll make my brush fairly big. And I'll paint white. 20% is pretty good. And let's just start to paint some of this in. Good. All right, that's looking pretty good now. So the next thing I want to do is get down in here with and brighten up some of this ice that's in this area down here. So let's make a curve and open this up just like that. And invert this mask. And now I'm going to grab my brush again and just start to paint in along some of this stuff where I want this to be brighter. So in here I'm going to need to be careful because I've got all these little striations in the ice and I don't want to disturb that contrast. Looking good. All right. And down just a little bit like this. And I'm just kind of doing this in a random way, just making sure that I don't get into my black parts. There we go. And I like what I see so far. So I don't think I need to really do anything on this rock. This is looking pretty nice. You know what? Maybe we could paint some contrast on here. Let's see. Let's see what this looks like. I don't know if this is even going to matter. Oh, well, yeah, that kind of looks good. It's subtle, but that looks nice. Okay. So let's zoom out. And we can actually start to finish this off now. What I really want to do is mess with my darks. And so I'm going to make a stamp. And I'm going to put a blur on that stamp. And you know, that looks pretty darn good. And what I want is I want the multiply blend mode because I want to add some mood to this. Now I'm just going to put enough in here that it's, there we go. It doesn't kill my whites. All right. So what I want is I only want this on the darkest parts of my image. So I'm going to grab the zone system here and I'm going to make a darks luminosity mask by just clicking on here, and it's going to calculate that. And really what I want to do, you can see what this mask looks like. If I turn the view mask button on, it's kind of broad and that's not really what I'm looking for. So what I want is to refine this mask, and I want these darks to be more isolated than they are. And I can do that by just moving this mid-tone slider over and making the black parts even blacker. So you gotta watch my feathering. I don't want to take this too far, you know. So if I come back this way, it gets broader. If I push that way, it gets narrower. And that's exactly what I want. So all I'm going to do is just steal this mask and drop it down on here. And we don't need this layer anymore. So that's looking pretty good. I like that. So now we can just kind of mitigate our situation here. And if I decide that I don't want it in my foreground, I think I do. I could just put a mask on here and do a gradient or do whatever it is that I want to do. All right, now I'm going to make a custom vignette. So I'm going to need my lasso tool. And we're going to go this way. And I'm just kind of trying to follow the contours of the image here, like this. And I know that looks like a lot is going to be darkened, but we're going to customize that in a second. So I want to invert this mask because I want the dark parts of the image to be the outer edge. And right now it's backwards. It's going to darken the center. So that's exactly what I don't want. So I need to invert this mask. And now I'm going to go up into the filter menu and grab a Gaussian blur. And I'm thinking about 450 pixels because I know what camera this was shot with. And so now I can darken the edges of this if I want. And I know some of you have been staring at those corners because we've got vignetting up here. But I thought I might put a vignette on here. And this is the place to fix that. I can just bring that back by erasing some of this vignette. So let's grab a brush, and I'm going to make it kind of big. And 20% is good to start with. And obviously I want to paint with black, and we can even this right out just like that. So it's always good to be thinking ahead, right? And that looks great. So let's see the effect of the vignette on our foreground. Yeah, I don't want it on this bottom part. So I'm actually going to erase it with a gradient. And all I need to do is grab my gradient tool and the same settings, a foreground to transparent gradient, linear at 100%. And in this case, I want black because I want to erase this. So I'm just going to start like right here, hold my shift key down to constrain that, and just erase that gradient in that spot. And now this is what I get, and I like that. That looks great. So I think the last thing we need to do here is just bring out a little bit more of this whiteness, especially in this area here. So we're going to make a double vignette, and I'm going to use my lasso tool again. I'm going to make that kind of big. There we go. And we're going to put it on a curve. And you'll see what happens when I start to lighten this up. And I want to use the same blur that I used before. So the last filter with the last settings that you applied are going to be right here at the top of the filter menu. So I'm just going to press that, and that's what I get. And now we can just kind of, yeah, that looks good. And just a little bit of contrast there. And there you have it. So evening or morning on the lake in Olympic State Park. If you want to check out some of the workshops that Blake and I are going to be doing, you can click on that link below if you're interested. Until next time, this is Jim Walninsky from the PhotoTribe. Be creative, have fun, and I'll see you next time.